This is the second part of section 10.6a. These are some examples of how to complete the square. As we talked about the other side, we're always going to take half of the middle term, square it, and add it to both sides. So here you see we have half of the b, and then we squared it and added to this side. So let's look at our first problem. We use a 7-step method to complete the square. Our first step, we're going to stick in plus blank equals 3 plus blank, identifying the fact that we're going to need to be adding in things to both sides. Our second step, we're going to ask ourselves, what must go in the blanks to complete the square on both sides? Half of 6 is 3, 3 squared is 9, so I'm going to add a 9 to both sides. My third step is to rewrite the left side as a binomial squared, and then simplify the right. Well, to write it as a binomial squared, we merely take, as it says up here at the top, half of the b term. And so we're going to take half of 6x plus 3. And then on the right side, we just simplify to get 12. Our fourth step is to take the same binomial squared that we had before and the same 12, except what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of the left and the square root of the right, remembering when we do so that we must have a plus or minus in front. On our fifth step, when we take the square root of something squared, we're left with what's inside. Then, as we take the other part, we're going to have to consider what is the square root of 12. It's 2 answers, and in these cases, we're going to have to make sure that we do our answers with a calculator. I hope you remember that an exponent of 1/2 is the same as a square root. So as I take the square root of this on my calculator, I get plus or minus 3.46. This is the first time that we've had a problem that hasn't worked out nice and neatly. Our sixth step, we're going to break this up into 2 parts. X plus 3 equals positive 3.46, and x plus 3 equals a negative 3.46. Now we're going to solve each problem by subtracting 3 from both sides of both parts. This gives us our answers on step 7 of positive 0.46 and negative 6.46. We need to remember to write our answer in set notation with the smaller one first, so negative 6.46, comma, 0.46. I've done my problems using them to the nearest hundredth as an example. Now let's look at the bottom problem. It's very similar to the top. We'll use the same 7 steps as we have just done. In this case, the problem is already have the 14 isolated on the other side. So we're going to go right to the first step, and we're going to put in plus blank equals negative 14 plus blank. I hope by now that you've gotten some experience of knowing what goes in that blank. Half of 10 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So we've put that into our problem. Our second step is to write it as a binomial squared. X minus 5 squared equals 11. Then our third step is to take the square root of both sides of the problem. So I've got the exact same problem as before, except I'm going to take the square root of both, remembering to put a plus or minus in front of each part. Our fourth step, remembering taking the square root of something squared, we're left with what's inside, and then I use my calculator to find the square root of 11. The square root of 11 is 3.31, or 3.32 if I round to the nearest hundredth. I'm now going to solve my problem and say x plus 5 equals positive 3.32 and x plus 5 equals negative 3.32. As we're working through this, we're going to have to solve this by subtracting 5 from both sides on both problems. That gives us an answer of x equals 3.32 minus 5, that's negative 1.68, or x equals negative 8.32. We're writing them as a solution set the smaller one coming first, that's 8.32, and negative 1.68. Now, completing the square is only going to work successfully, typically, when we have an x term that's an even number.